Chosen one, God should not have to repeat the same warning a third time for you to recognize what the first 2 moments were trying to show you. But hear this carefully. This is not God threatening you. This is not punishment. This is not a prophecy of disaster. This is a warning about a pattern. The first warning may have arrived quietly. Something changed inside you. A person began leaving you drained. A habit started feeling heavy. An opportunity kept returning to your mind. For a few seconds, you simply KNEW what needed to change. Then your mind stepped in. Maybe I am imagining this. Maybe I am being too sensitive. Maybe I need another sign. So, you waited. You returned to your routine. You let ordinary life cover the message, and the first warning disappeared beneath noise before it ever became action. Then something happened again. The details may have changed, but the message underneath did not. The same relationship exposed the same wound. The same opportunity returned. The same inner sentence came back. This cannot continue. That was warning number 2. And still, you may have waited, not because God abandoned you. You may have been caught between recognition and movement, where fear and overthinking can turn clarity into delay. So, before you ask God for sign number 3, ask a different question. What happened after the first 2 signs arrived? What if the problem is no longer the message? What if the message was clear enough, but something inside your daily life kept breaking that clarity apart? That is the question we are going to answer. We are not going to chase another vague prophecy. We are going to examine the pattern. You will see why repeated confirmation can become avoidance, and why noise can overpower discernment. You may already know what this is about. The conversation you keep postponing, the boundary you keep weakening, the place you keep returning to, even though your peace disappears there. Or maybe this warning is not about leaving something. Maybe it is about finally beginning the work, beginning the healing, beginning the decision you keep delaying because you want certainty no human life can give you. This is where the warning becomes mercy, because a warning reveals a consequence before the consequence becomes your identity. If this is speaking directly to something you already recognize, say it clearly. I hear the warning. Not because you are afraid, not because someone told you to panic. Say it because you are willing to stop pretending you do not see what has been repeating. And hold one question as we move forward. What if God has already answered you twice, and this final warning is not asking you to hear something new? What if it is asking you to understand why you keep asking for more evidence after the answer has already entered your life? There is a name for that pattern. Once you see it, you may recognize how often it has been controlling your decisions without ever announcing itself. Chosen one, the pattern has a name. It is the third sign trap. It begins when confirmation stops helping you discern and starts helping you delay. The cycle is simple. You feel clarity. Then fear enters. You search for reassurance. Another message gives you temporary relief, but the relief does not last. Soon you are searching again, not because the answer changed, but because certainty faded. This is where many sincere people get stuck. They think more evidence will make obedience easier. Usually, it does not. More evidence can become another hiding place when the real issue is discomfort, because no amount of confirmation can remove every risk from a meaningful decision. Ask yourself something right now. What do I already know that more evidence cannot make easier to obey? Do not rush past that question. The answer may be uncomfortable, but discomfort does not automatically mean the answer is wrong. Maybe you know a boundary needs to become stronger. Maybe you know a relationship cannot continue in the same form. Maybe you know you have been delaying work that matters to you. Or maybe you know you keep calling fear discernment because fear sounds more respectable when it wears spiritual language. That does not mean every feeling is a message from God. It does not mean every difficult moment is a warning. Discernment needs testing. Look for repetition. Look for consistency. Look at the fruit a pattern produces. Ask whether the direction moves you toward truth, responsibility, peace, and integrity rather than panic. Fear often demands an answer now. Discernment can remain steady without screaming. Fear wants endless reassurance. Discernment can survive a quiet room. Fear keeps changing its argument. A deeper knowing often becomes clearer when the noise around it finally settles. Here is a simple practice. Write one sentence without asking anyone else what they think. Complete these words in your own mind. The thing I already know is this. Then stop. Do not defend it. Do not explain it. Just notice what appears before your mind begins building a case against it. That first sentence is not automatically divine truth, but it gives you something honest to examine. You can test it against your values, your responsibilities, wise counsel, and the fruit it would create. The goal is not blind action. The goal is to stop using endless searching as a substitute for decision. If you are still here, there is probably a reason this pattern feels familiar. You may take decisions seriously. You may care deeply about getting things right. Those qualities can protect you, but when fear takes control of them, carefulness quietly becomes avoidance. And avoidance has a cost. Sometimes the cost arrives slowly. You lose energy. You lose confidence. You lose time. Sometimes the cost is another month inside the same question, asking for certainty life cannot provide. So do not ask for sign number 3 yet. First, look at what happened to signs number 1 and 2. Did you test them honestly, or did you keep reopening the case every time fear returned? That difference matters more than another dramatic confirmation ever could. Because the second warning often does not arrive as a louder voice, it arrives as a cost. The pattern starts taking something from you. And when that happens, what you ignored spiritually becomes visible practically. That is where we go next. Warning number 2 may already be sitting inside something you have been calling normal. Chosen one, warning number 2 often looks less spiritual than warning number 1. It may not come through a sudden realization. It may come through the cost of repeating what you already knew was hurting you. You notice your energy changing. You sleep, but still feel mentally tired. You enter the same conversation and leave with the same heaviness. You promise yourself that next time will be different, yet the same pattern returns because the decision underneath it never changed. Sometimes the cost is time. Months pass while you keep waiting for certainty. Sometimes it is confidence. Every delayed decision teaches you to trust yourself a little less. Think about Jonah for a moment. He received direction, resisted it, and tried to move away from what he knew. The point is simpler. Direction does not disappear just because distraction increases. That matters because many people believe confusion proves the original signal was false. But confusion can appear after clarity. It can grow because you keep adding opinions, fears, possibilities, and imagined outcomes until the simple thing you once knew becomes buried under mental noise. This is why repetition matters. One difficult day can be random, but when the same pattern keeps producing the same result, wisdom asks you to look at what connects those events. Maybe a certain environment always destroys your peace. Maybe every time you ask for advice, you leave with more confusion than you had before. The repeated result is information. Do not turn that into superstition. Do not treat every inconvenience like a coded message from heaven. Look for consistency. Look for the fruit. Notice what becomes clearer when fear is quiet. If you can see the pattern now, say it quietly to yourself. I see the pattern. Not because you understand every detail, not because you have perfect certainty. Say it because what was unconscious is becoming visible, and what becomes visible can finally be changed. There is another layer you need to understand. Have you ever gone to bed certain about something, then awakened the next morning and doubted nearly all of it? Nothing external changed, The facts were the same, yet your access to clarity felt completely different. That is not a small detail. It may explain why the same warning can feel obvious in one moment and distant in another. You can receive insight in silence, then lose contact with it after messages, notifications, opinions, stress, and unfinished responsibilities flood your attention. At that point, you may assume God became silent. But what if the signal did not disappear? What if the noise around the signal simply became louder than your ability to hold it? That question changes where you look for the problem. The next breakthrough begins there. More information may not be the cure for confusion. More spiritual content may not be the cure either. Sometimes the person searching hardest for clarity is unknowingly creating the exact conditions that make clarity harder to recognize. And once you see that reversal, you will understand why asking for more signs can leave you feeling less certain than before. Chosen one. There is a reversal almost nobody notices. The harder you chase clarity, the easier it can become to bury it. More input feels responsible. More advice feels wise. More messages feel spiritual. But when every voice enters at once, the signal can disappear inside the noise. You open one video for guidance, then another. You ask a friend. You read comments. You search for a second opinion. Soon your mind is carrying 10 interpretations of one problem, and the clarity you had at the beginning feels weaker than ever. This is what I call signal-to-noise reversal. You think you are gathering clarity, but you may be increasing confusion. The more competing inputs you add, the harder it becomes to notice which thought was steady before everyone else started speaking. That does not mean wise counsel is bad. It means counsel needs space around it. A crowded mind can turn useful advice into more pressure, because every new perspective creates another possibility you feel responsible for solving. So here is the practice. For the next 24 hours, stop collecting opinions about the one issue already exhausting you. Do not search for another sign. Do not watch another message about it. Give your mind a small field of silence and observe what remains. Write down one sentence. What do I already know before I ask anyone else? Then write a second. What is fear saying will happen if I act? Keep those two sentences separate. One is information, the other may be a prediction. Now, notice your body. Your jaw may be tight, your shoulders may be lifted, your stomach may feel restless. These sensations are not proof of divine direction, but they can show you how much stress is entering the decision before you have even made it. Take one slow breath. Let your shoulders drop. Do not force an answer. Clarity often becomes easier to examine when the nervous system is not treating every choice like an emergency. If this makes sense, say it simply. I make room to hear. Not to hear more voices. To hear what survives when the extra voices become quiet. There is another reason this matters. You can receive a clear thought at night, then wake up scattered the next morning. You can feel certain in prayer, then lose the thread after an hour of notifications, errands, work, and unfinished conversations. So what if the message was never the only variable? What if the condition of the receiver matters too? I want you to hold that question. Later, we are going to connect it with something researchers have studied about how different regions of the brain cooperate during higher-level thinking. Not because science can tell you what God is saying, because it cannot. But science can help us think about attention, integration, and mental clarity. And that may explain why some people do not need a louder message. They need better conditions for receiving, holding, and acting on the clarity already there. Before we get there, we have to look directly at the receiver problem. Because if you keep blaming your faith for every moment of mental fog, you may keep trying to solve the wrong problem with more effort. Chosen one, now we reach the hidden variable. The message and the receiver are not the same thing. A clear signal can arrive, but if the mind receiving it is exhausted, scattered, or overloaded, Holding that clarity long enough to act can become difficult. You may recognize this in ordinary moments. You lose a word in the middle of a sentence. You begin one task, notice another, then realize later that neither one is finished. You may also recognize it spiritually. You pray and feel settled. You write something down that feels clear. Then the day becomes loud. Your attention fragments, and by afternoon, you are questioning what seemed obvious only hours earlier. Do not immediately turn that into a verdict about your faith. Mental fog does not automatically mean spiritual failure. Scattered attention does not prove God has rejected you. Practical conditions can affect how clearly you process, remember, compare, and decide. Sleep matters, stress matters, constant input matters, your environment matters. None of those things can tell you what God is saying, but they can influence the condition in which you are trying to listen. This is what I call the receiver problem. You may have spent months examining the message while ignoring the instrument through which you process it. Think back to when you were younger. Maybe ideas came faster. Curiosity felt natural. You could stay with one thought without checking a screen every few minutes. Adulthood adds pressure, schedules, and constant access to other people's voices. Many people begin treating a crowded mind as normal, then wonder why clear decisions feel harder to reach. That does not mean childhood was perfect. It means your mental environment changed. And if the environment changed, part of restoring clarity may involve changing the conditions around attention instead of demanding that your mind simply work harder. Imagine one morning that begins differently. You wake up and do not immediately invite 20 voices into your head. You know the first important thing you need to do. You can hold one thought without putting it on trial for an hour. You move before overanalysis builds a wall around the decision. You feel present. You remember what matters. You create again, not because every problem vanished, but because enough internal space returned for your own mind to participate. Imagine what changes when your first response to clarity is no longer doubt. That is not about becoming reckless. It is about becoming a clearer steward of your attention. If you are still here, your identity is beginning to shift. You are not simply someone searching for signs. Call that person the clear receiver, someone who creates enough quiet to test what is true and enough stability to act when the next responsible step becomes clear. Now we reach the question that changes the second half of this message. Understanding the pattern is powerful, but understanding alone does not change the condition that keeps reproducing it. So how do you support the receiver itself? What can you do when you have already tried to focus harder, pray harder, think harder, and push through the fog? There is a practical piece I promise to return to. It begins with research into the human brain, and it leads to a simple tool built around focused listening. We need to examine it carefully, because the goal is not hype. The goal is to understand what it claims to do, who it may fit, and where personal responsibility still remains. Chosen one. Remember the question I asked you to hold. What if the message was never the only variable? We have looked at the signal. We have looked at the noise. Now we have to look at the receiver, because insight only changes your life when you can hold it long enough to respond. This is the missing piece for many people. They keep forcing more clarity into an overloaded system. They pray harder, they concentrate harder. But if the same pattern remains, more effort can simply create more pressure. The goal is not to manufacture a spiritual message. Reduce noise, support attention, and create better conditions for clear thinking. That cannot tell you what God wants. It can only help you become more present while making responsible decisions. There is a piece of research often mentioned in this conversation. Roger Sperry received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1981 for work that included discoveries about the functional specialization of the cerebral hemispheres. His research changed how scientists understood important differences between the two sides of the brain. That history matters, but a Nobel Prize does not prove that any modern audio program works. It does not prove a spiritual claim. It is part of the scientific background used in the presentation of the tool I am about to show you. According to the product presentation, the idea is a short listening experience built around what it calls neural synchronization and whole brain activation. Those are product claims, not a medical guarantee or proof that every listener will get the same result. Before I tell you the name, consider two experiences in the product material. A woman from California reported sincere spiritual practice, but still felt disconnected and mentally blocked. After using the audio, she described feeling clearer and more connected to her inner process. A man from Texas reported mental fog and difficulty making practical decisions. He said the listening routine helped him feel more organized and decisive. These are personal reports, not promises of what will happen for you. The tool is called the Genius Switch. According to the product material, Dr. Daniel Barone presents it as an audio-based program built around what the company calls neural sync technology and whole brain activation. The routine itself is intentionally simple. You use headphones, you close your eyes if you are somewhere safe to do so. You relax and listen for about 8 minutes a day. There is no complicated ritual to memorize and no requirement to replace your existing spiritual practice. That simplicity is part of the appeal. The Genius Switch is not a replacement for prayer, sleep, medical care, or wise decisions. It is an optional cognitive support tool for people who want to test a short listening routine. And this is important. It is not for everyone. If you want a product to make decisions for you, this is not that. If you want an audio track to prove what God is saying, this is not that either. It may fit if you already do the inner work, but your attention feels scattered. It may also fit if you want something simple and understand that a tool can support a process without replacing responsibility. According to the product presentation, the regular price is $49, while the offer shown is $39. It also describes lifetime digital access and 4 bonuses. The bonuses include guided visualization, a smart grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and a 5 habits infographic. The product material also states a 100% money-back guarantee. Check the actual terms on the official sales page before purchasing, because details can change. Do not buy because you feel spiritually pressured. Do not interpret this message as God commanding you to purchase anything. The spiritual urgency in this video is about your pattern. The commercial decision is yours. If the tool sounds useful, you can read the details through the official link in the description or pinned comment and decide for yourself. The product material says the official version is distributed through its own page, not common streaming platforms. If you explore it, use the official source listed with this video. Now bring the conversation back to the reason this matters. A tool is only valuable if it helps you become more present, more responsible, and more capable of following through on clear decisions. It does not replace discernment or remove uncertainty, and that leads to the deeper breakthrough. Even with a clearer mind, there is still one place many people get trapped. They wait for fear to disappear before they move. That sounds like discernment, but sometimes it is certainty addiction. The next step is learning how to obey what is responsible and clear without demanding a dramatic feeling first. That is where warning becomes action. Chosen one. Now we reach the place where many people lose momentum. They finally see the pattern. They finally understand the noise. They even know the next step. But then they wait for one more feeling before they move. They wait to feel fearless. That sounds wise at first. It sounds careful, but sometimes it is not discernment. Sometimes it is certainty addiction. You keep waiting for a level of emotional safety that no meaningful decision can guarantee. Fear says you must feel completely sure. Wisdom says you need enough clarity to take the next responsible step. Those are not the same thing. You may already know this from your own life. A decision can be right and still feel uncomfortable. A boundary can be necessary and still make you nervous. A new direction can fit you deeply and still awaken doubt. This is where obedience without drama begins. You do not need thunder. You do not need a perfect sign. You do not need every anxious thought to disappear before you act with integrity. Ask yourself 3 questions. What do I already know? What part of me is asking to postpone because it is afraid? What is one responsible next step I can take now? Keep the step small enough to be honest. Send the message, write the plan, close the tab, take the walk, make the appointment, remove one distraction. Say no where you keep saying maybe. The point is not speed. The point is movement. A small aligned action teaches your mind that clarity can lead somewhere other than another round of analysis. Now imagine what happens if that pattern continues. You wake up and you do not put every decision on trial. You hear your own thoughts more clearly. You create again. You protect your time. You stop carrying 10 unfinished choices in your head. You begin to feel more present, not because every problem disappears, but because your energy is no longer divided between what you know and what you keep refusing to face. This is the future state that matters. A mind that can receive, a heart that can test, a person who can move without demanding emotional perfection first. If you have stayed with this message this long, something has already changed. You are not simply looking for signs anymore. You are learning to recognize what happens after the sign arrives. So say this clearly. I release the 3rd sign. I do not need endless confirmation to take one responsible step. I do not need fear to disappear before I move with wisdom. And remember this, the next faithful step does not have to solve your entire life. It only has to stop the old pattern from making the next decision for you. That is how a warning becomes wisdom. That is how discernment becomes action. And that is how you stop repeating the same cycle while calling it patience. In a moment, we are going to make this practical in your body and attention. You will separate what you know, what you fear, and what other people think. Then you will choose which one deserves to lead. Chosen one. Before we close, there is one practical step I want you to experience. Not analyze. Experience. If you are somewhere safe, let your eyes soften. You do not have to force them closed. Imagine 3 pieces of paper in your hands. On the first one are the words, what I know. On the second, what I fear. On the third, what other people think. Do not judge any of them. Fear can contain useful information. Other people can offer wisdom. But none of those voices should automatically become your master. Now imagine placing the 3rd piece of paper down. Other people can advise you, but they cannot live your life for you. Let that one rest. Now look at the paper that says, what I fear. Notice how quickly fear predicts the future. It says you will fail. It says you will regret everything. It says discomfort means danger. Place that paper down too. You are not denying fear. You are refusing to let fear make the decision by itself. Now only one paper remains, what I know. Hold that one gently, not as absolute certainty, not as proof that every thought is divine. Hold it as the clearest truth you can responsibly test today. Place one hand over your chest, if that feels natural. Take one slow breath. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw soften. Say this inside yourself. Clarity does not need to shout to be real. Sometimes, the truth becomes easier to recognize when panic stops demanding the microphone. If the 8-minute listening tool we discussed earlier interests you, the official details are in the description or pinned comment. Read them carefully and decide for yourself. You do not need to buy anything to practice what we are doing right now. This matters Because no tool can replace the work of becoming honest about your patterns. A tool can support attention. It can give you a routine, but it cannot choose your boundaries, make your decisions, or take your next step. Maybe you have tried many things already. That does not mean you need 15 more practices. You may need less noise, less compulsive searching, less pressure to solve your entire future in one night. Maybe you think you missed God completely. Then hear this carefully. Missing a moment does not mean you are condemned to miss every moment after it. Awareness changes what becomes possible next. Maybe none of this applies to your situation. That is allowed too. Take what is useful, leave what is not. Truth does not need to force itself into every story. Now return to the paper still in your hand. What I know. Ask one final question. What is the smallest responsible action that honors this clarity within the next day? Do not choose something dramatic just because dramatic feels spiritual. Choose something real, a conversation, a boundary, a written decision, a quiet hour, a first step. You do not need to become a different person tonight. You need to stop feeding the exact pattern that keeps returning you to the same place. And before this message ends, we are going to seal that choice with a declaration. Not a declaration of panic, a declaration of identity. You are not going to live through the same warning a fourth time while pretending you never saw it. Chosen one, now let the noise fall away. You do not need another argument. You do not need another sign. You do not need to punish yourself for what you did not understand before. Take one slow breath. Let gratitude enter the place where fear has been sitting. You can be grateful for clarity without pretending you handled every earlier moment perfectly. Release the need for endless confirmation. Release the fear that keeps dressing itself like wisdom. Release the voices that make you doubt every quiet truth before you have even tested it. Release the shame around hesitation. You are allowed to learn. You are allowed to become more discerning than you were before. Most of all, release the identity of the confused person. Confusion may have visited you. It does not have to become your name. This warning does not need to become a story about failure. It can become the moment you finally recognize the pattern clearly enough to stop repeating it. So let this be your declaration. I do not need panic to move. I do not need perfect certainty to act with integrity. I can discern without obsession. I can listen without chasing every voice. I can protect my attention. I can test what I sense. I can take responsibility for the condition of the receiver. I can receive grace for what I missed. I can learn from what repeated. I can move faithfully with what I know today. I am not asking fear for permission anymore. I am not waiting for a dramatic feeling to prove that the next responsible step is real. The warning has changed now. It is no longer only a warning. It has become wisdom. You know what the third sign trap looks like. You know what signal to noise reversal feels like. You know that the message and the receiver are not the same thing. You also know that a clearer receiver still has to choose. Clarity without movement becomes another memory. Clarity with action becomes a new pattern. So think about the one thing that became visible while you listened. Do not force a grand answer. Let the simplest, honest answer rise. What do you already know? What have you been asking to hear again because acting on it felt uncomfortable? Now make the commitment small and real. One step, one boundary, one decision, one act of honesty. You do not have to control what happens next. You do have responsibility for what you do with the clarity you have now. And if these words match the decision you are making, say them with intention. I hear and I move. I hear and I move. Not because I am afraid of punishment, not because I believe grace has disappeared. I move because I refuse to keep calling repetition a mystery when the pattern has already been revealed. I move with humility. I move with discernment. I move with responsibility. I move without demanding that every uncertainty disappear first. The first warning brought recognition. The second brought repetition. This final warning brought understanding. Now the loop closes. The question was never only whether you could hear the message. The question was, what happened after you heard it? This time, let the answer be different. This time, protect the clarity. This time, take the next faithful step. If this is your decision, let the final words be simple. I hear and I move. Amen.